Greetings and welcome. Thank you for joining us for this virtual Lyceum on Where You Live Matters. And it's a pleasure to be able to introduce to you today the featured speaker during this session, Fred Bartlett. Fred's a West Point graduate. He's a former U.S. Army Troop Commander and a U.S. Army Ranger. And during his second act as a lawyer, he was first in his class in law school, and he's actually got the top academic record in the 120-year history of the University of Illinois College of Law, which Fred is an incredible feat. And if that's not enough, Fred's been considered one of the best trial lawyers in the United States and is the only trial lawyer to be selected by 2 U.S. presidents of different parties to represent them in their most important courtroom matters. Aside from Fred's impressive career achievements in the Army and as a lawyer, he surprisingly has a new passion. And that's spreading the message that people can live a much longer, happier, healthier, and more fulfilling life if they commit themselves to combat the effects of aging by strength training. Now, Fred is a co-author of the book, Choosing the StrongPath, Reversing the Downward Spiral of Aging, which outlines the impact strength training has on health and well-being. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be able to introduce to you today Fred Bartlett. Fred, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being willing to talk a little bit more about what's been fueling your passion right now.
Well, I'm glad to be here. It's sort of my Act 5 at age 87, and I'm honored to be here, and I'll do my best to get these very important points across.
You bet. Like I said, it's a distinct pleasure, sir. Fred, I want to start by just saying the people that are hearing this right now, they're hearing your impressive background in service and in law. They're probably like me, and they're wondering, how in the world does an Army Ranger turned trial lawyer get into studying aging research and sharing the message about what's possible?
Well, as usual in important things in the world, there was a woman involved. So I was 50 years old, and I thought I was really fit. I'd been a Ranger, and I, quote, exercised, end quote, and I met this amazing woman. She was 35, I was 50. I thought I'd show off. Let's go to a gym and exercise like guys like me sometimes do. Went to the gym, we walked out. She said, that was ridiculous. I can remember her words. She said, you're gonna be dead at 60 if you don't work out harder. I said to her, what should I do? She said, I'll find you a real gym. And she found a strip mall gym where guys drop weights and make loud noises when they exercise and stuff. And I started working there, and I got involved. So how to get involved in researching it, though? That was your question. So
yes.
For 10 years, I exercised really hard. I got stronger. As I moved into my early 60s, I noticed that my buddies were all disappearing. I like to ski. I like to play golf. Suddenly, people's knees hurt, backs hurt. They couldn't do this. They couldn't do that. And just about 25 years ago, I just got on Medline, which is a big a medical research tool, and I started looking. And after 2 or 3 years, I came across this really odd term, sarcopenia. Never seen it before, looked it up, and I realized for the first time in my life that the frailty I saw in my parents, my grandmother, my grandpa, my aunts and uncles, the frailty I saw as they moved into their 70s is not inevitable. It's the result of a recognized disease, a disease recognized by the AMA and World Health Organization as a disease with a cure. Yeah. And of course, that changed everything.
So it sounds like you've had several personal experiences, which then kind of motivated you to get a little bit more into the research and study.
That's right. I said recently before we got on the video that in high school, West Point, Ranger Detachment, Troop Commander, law school, in 2 law firms, all the people I've met in that long journey, I don't know a single person who's my age, 87, and has a high, wonderful, happy quality of life. They all have the frailties of old age, and they all think it's inevitable, and nobody's ever told them there are cures. And that, to me, that's why we're here.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's why we're sharing this message. And Fred, that's unfortunate that that's what's happened, But I want to focus on something, and this is a good transition into my next question for you. You mentioned that that's what they just believe would happen. And I know that you're very passionate about sharing this particular message, that people can live a much happier, healthier, longer life if they take a more proactive approach to their well-being. And the theme of our virtual conference here this round is where you live matters, basically meaning the environment in which we live and interact with determines a large part of how well we age. And I'd like to take a different spin on that theme and kind of frame it in terms of where you live in your own mind matters, meaning the perception of what I believe will happen to me as I get older often shapes the reality of what does happen to me. And you just mentioned, as somebody that's 87 who's focused on aging for some time now, you have a lot of personal experiences with other people who maybe took a different path, if you will. What, from your perspective, what's the role and the importance of mindset in making what you write and speak on a reality?
Motivation is everything, because the cure for sarcopenia, the disease, is intense physical activity. People don't like that. I was a witness at the FDA's hearing a couple of years ago on sarcopenia, which they say is one of the most serious diseases in America. And all they talked about at the FDA hearing was pharma, drugs, and anybody who could invent a drug that would let you move across a room 2% faster would make billions. Everybody wants to take a pill in America today. And when you say you got to go to the gym, when you first walk in, you're not going to be comfortable because you never thought much about it before, and it's really hard. But if you do it, you'll be, at the end of the day, exiting a long tunnel into bright daylight. And instead of being on this downward spiral of aging, weaker, less exercise, weaker, you'll have a fabulous, truly fabulous life. And my deal is, most people live dying. I want to die living. Everybody should want from 60 to 90 is half of your adult life, just about. For most people, the years 60 to 90 are not pleasant. They're in the downward spiral of aging. And listen to this. One of the top doctors in America, Oxford, Harvard, Penn, everything says that the last 30 years of your life are so miserable because of the frailty of aging. And he wrote a book on this. Everybody should die at 75. Because life is not worth living after 75. That's Ezekiel Emanuel, Rahm Emanuel's brother. And he says pneumonia is a blessing because it kills us very quickly without pain when we're in our 70s. That's what the medical community basically all over the world thinks, unbelievably. How can we expect people to be taught anything different when our doctors don't know any different?
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to jump ahead and kind of focus on that point that you just made of there seems to be a disconnect out there. And you mentioned there's a disconnect with medical professionals. What can we do to bridge that disconnect?
Well, the disconnect is amazing. I lecture medical schools, conventions of doctors, and at the end of it, I say, now I've told you some facts. Does anybody disagree with the facts? No. And I say, does everybody here think, what do you think? Is frailty with aging inevitable? Every hand goes up. It's inevitable. And I ask, how many people here have heard of sarcopenia? All the hands go down. And I have two sons-in-laws who are surgeons. And one of them sort of gets it, and the other one doesn't get it at all. Even in the general population. This is interesting. I see women 55 to 70 getting it quickly for some reason. I see the last people to get it are men who have been very successful professionally, who are 65, 70, 72 in there, and the winners of life don't get it at all and don't want to hear what I have to say. Now, why the smartest, most successful men in the world don't get it? Somebody smarter than me has to say that. But there are these dramatic differences to the point where I sometimes say, you know, am I just beating my drums and nobody's listening?
Yeah.
You're listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got thousands of people right now that are tuning into this video listening, and hopefully it resonates with some of those folks as well too. I want to go back a little bit to one of your other points. You were starting to talk a little bit about the main thesis of your book and talking about some of the effects of sarcopenia. In your book, you focus a lot on bringing awareness to and combating sarcopenia. You use the analogy and talk about two different paths that a person has, either taking the strong path, as you call it, or the frail trail. Tell me a little bit more about that, those two paths.
Well, the frail trail is the path that 99.999% of people in their 50s and entering their 60s are on. They've been told, take it easy. Only something like 5% of people over 65 lift weights. Most of them don't. They become less active. When they become less active, they become weaker. When they become weaker, they become less active, and they're on this downward spiral. After 70, for example, 1 week in a hospital, flat on your back, you lose half your strength. And you never get it back again unless you pump iron, and nobody pumps iron. So, as Dr. Emanuel says, life is just plain flat miserable for most people after 60. On the other hand, I can look you right in the eye and I can say, I've never in my entire life been happier than I am now. I can do all the things I've ever done and love to do better than I could. I was skiing with my granddaughter, who's a great athlete, and my son, who's a 62 or 60 and a terrific skier recently. And he said, Dad, he said, you're stronger, faster, better, happier than you were when you were 40. And I love to play golf. I love to ski. I'd love to practice law. I love to try cases. I haven't had to change anything. I just get to me being me. And, you know, if tomorrow morning I didn't wake up, I would have had an amazing life right to the very end. There's nothing about my life I don't love. How great is that?
That's absolutely amazing. And, you know, I think it would behoove everybody if they had what I believe is that same mindset. And I want to ask you, what has created your drive or your motivation? Is it the personal experience? Is it just the grittiness in your nature? Or is it the research that you've read that drives you and motivates you?
Well, that's a good question. Who knows? If I had to guess, I'd say my mom was an amazing woman. She was the daughter of an orphan immigrant from Germany. And she always said to me, you have to be the best you can be. You can't be somebody else, so you can't be them. But when you die, you have to say, I did my best. You know, in Ranger School, over the entrance to the Ranger School, it says all human limitations are self-imposed. There's also another sign up there that says a potbelly cannot lead men. And then if there's one piece of research that's changed me the most, and almost, you ask your doctor if he's ever heard of it. It's probably the most important medical book written in the last 100 years. It's called The Story of the Human Body by Daniel Lieberman. And he says, our bodies today, our gene pool is exactly the way it was 50,000 years ago. And of course, the way our gene pool is formed is natural selection. When you were born and when everybody watching this was born, they had 20 to 30 mutations in their cells. Some were good, some were bad, some were neutral. The bad ones don't get in the gene pool because you die early. The good ones don't get in the gene pool because they're neutral. But the neutral ones, the good mutations all get in the gene pool because in evolution, that just means you lived longer and you had more progeny. That means that every cell of our body, not just our muscles, our eyes, our eyelashes, our cells, the interior of our cells, everything was selected for success in the world of 50,000 years ago. Well, 50,000 years ago was intense physical exercise 24/7. Walking, hunting, feeding your family, fighting off saber-toothed tigers. So I read that and I thought, that's it. Our bodies were designed for a world of intense physical exercise. Our genes cry out. They need intense physical exercise. And most people in America today are totally sedentary. The average woman today doesn't get 1 hour of intense physical exercise a year. So Lieberman says our bodies are mismatched to today's world, and they get all these chronic diseases as a result. I believe it. Read the book. You will find it fascinating. It makes total sense. It's very scientific. It's written by a top guy at Harvard Medical School.
Yes.
Once you get the notion that there's not one, that there's an overarching issue. Our bodies will always be at their best in the world they were designed for, an intense physical exercise. At everything we do, we want our bodies to be at their best.
You bet.
We're less likely to get diseases if our bodies are at our best. We're less likely to get Alzheimer's. We're less likely to fall down. So it almost is that simple. And in the last 8 or 9 years, I've seen the research go from just focusing on don't get disabled.
Mm-hmm.
My parents were pretty much disabled the last 10 years of their lives, like most are. And I didn't want to get disabled. And now we've progressed from don't get chronic diseases. If you get it, recover from the chronic diseases. And now I'm looking at writing, teaching, creating an entirely new narrative for the last 30 years of your life. Golden years are not sitting on your butt feeling awful. Golden years are being the person you always were.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. First off, I want to say thank you for sharing a little bit about your nature of what's driven you. Second, some of the things that you're talking about within our genes and our nature as human beings, it sounds very familiar. Our president of Masterpiece Living also wrote a book. It's called Live Long, Die Short. And he makes that exact same assertion in the book. And I really appreciate that you're sharing some of the science and the research. And I want to go a little bit deeper in that. And you mentioned you're writing another book, and any writer on the topic of biology or any topic of science, if you've written a book, you're very well versed in the research of that particular subject. And I know for a fact that you know your research well on this topic. You've been researching and referencing some of the best studies. And so I'll ask you, of all of the research that you've seen and read, if you could summarize the consistencies, the consistent findings through all of that research about what it's saying about your thesis, what would that be?
All of this stuff is on my website. There's no advertising on the website at all, none, no ads, nothing. But the proposition is that we're now seeing accepted, not just by a few outliers, but at Harvard, CDC, Center for Disease Control, the UK colleges of medicine. These are the things they're saying now, and that you couldn't have imagined this 10 years ago, that intense exercise is a miracle drug. Intense exercise is the fountain of youth. Intense exercise actually reverses the age of our cells. Women in the top 10% of fitness are 90% less likely to get Alzheimer's than women in the middle.
That's powerful.
All of these chronic diseases that kill us that didn't exist 50,000 years ago. Heart disease, 10 kinds of cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, all of these diseases. Harvard Medical School says they're 80% caused by inactivity. 80%, and all this stuff's on my website. And what is amazing is this data ought to be on 60 Minutes. And it ought to be written up in all the newspapers. And nobody cares about hearing it, even though it's all peer-reviewed stuff. This is just not what one guy thinks. I've collected. I'm a trial lawyer. You don't win jury trials by BSing. You win by producing hard facts that can be challenged.
Yep.
And everything I rely on in my book and on my website are hard, provable facts. And all I cite in every occasion to the actual medical studies.
And absolutely. And it sounds like those research studies that you're referencing come from very credible, prestigious institutions too. Fred, just for reference, what is the address for your website where all of that is located?
StrongPath.com.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
And it's interesting. When I got into this, I thought everybody gets bugged about their weight. And people are sick and tired of being told they got to lose weight. Sick and tired of it. And I realized, this was 15 years of research, getting up at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. every day so I could read this research and then be a trial lawyer. So, the fact is that the research is hardcore research and it works.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that. And that address, again, strongpath.com, is where a lot of these studies are referenced. And I know that you do keep that website up to date with some of the most current research there.
Almost every morning in my continuing research, I find something and I email Stephanie, who works on our website, Stephanie Krekorian of New York City, and it's posted within an hour.
Perfect. Yeah. So it's very up to date, very current. Fred, I really appreciate the insight that you've been sharing and the awareness that you're bringing to this subject that threatens everyone as they get older. And this isn't just older adults that we're talking about, but I want to take a moment and talk about action. I like being able to take information and research and apply it, put it into action, or whatever it's saying or whatever they've done, replicate the practice and achieve those same positive results. Now, let's take an older adult who's right now sedentary, as you mentioned, a lot of people are. What advice or motivation would you give to somebody that's not physically active or participating in strength training? And bear in mind, maybe they have some impairments that already are existing or some mobility issues starting out.
Well, fortunately, Harvard Medical School has a lot of publications on just this subject. And fortunately, they've allowed us to put the access to those publications on our website.
Great.
There's a link there called Strength Training for All Ages. And it's a detailed guide that tells how to get started safely for older adults. I'm not a physician. I can't say that just go in and kill yourself. You got to talk to a doctor. Unfortunately, your doctor's going to tend to say, take it easy. That's not what you need to do. At 87, I've always worked out my whole life, and every 2 weeks or two, I'm breaking lifetime strength records. Now that means 5 repetitions instead of 4, but I'm breaking the records. So look at the Harvard study on how to get started, find a gym nearby, find a trainer. It's helpful in getting started to have a trainer. People don't like the cost of a gym, but it's a lot better than suffering the downward spiral of aging.
Sure. And
gym memberships are paid for for people over 65. And your retirement or resort communities would have access to those. You don't need a trainer always, but you probably need a trainer to get started.
Sure.
Because it's really important that you do these exercises in very strict form to be sure you're getting the full benefit out of it. So that's what I'd encourage people who are totally sedentary. And most people today are totally sedentary. The spiral of aging, which used to take effect really seriously in the 60s, new research shows it's taking place now in the 40s because people sit around with their thumbs on phones.
Yeah.
They do nothing.
Absolutely. So I like how you have those resources available and it's broken out by age. And you also mentioned some tips of people who are currently sedentary on how to get started. How about people who are tuning into this? They've been shaking their head yes the entire time that we've been talking. They're saying, already doing it. What advice or motivation do you have for those people who are already participating in strength training and have a regular routine set?
Okay, what you want to do is you want to change your routine to focus harder on your weaknesses than on your strengths. Now, how do you know what your weaknesses are? On our website, we have videos of something called an FMS self-assessment. Most gyms offer this, many do, but you can see the exercises that you can test yourself. All college athletic teams, from women's lacrosse to swimming, when athletes get to college, they are given a functional assessment of their weak spots. It was kind of sobering to me the first time I did it and found out that some things were weaker than I wanted them to be.
Yeah.
I'm like most people, have a little achievement in life. I'm a fairly vain guy.
Yeah.
It was a little humbling. to learn that there were things I needed to weaken to strengthen. For example, falls. A third of people over 65 have a fall every year that changes their life. Half of them who have a fall will be dead within a year. You got to avoid falls. You see all the time, this guy had a fall and broke her hip, had a fall and broke her hip. Okay, there are specific exercises you can do yourself at home to dramatically reduce the need for falling. All the way from standing on one foot with your eyes closed, jumping up on a Bosu ball, you know, these half balls you see, they're soft on top, and strengthening your shin muscles. Now, whoever heard of strengthening their shin muscles? Turns out that shin muscles are a big factor for falling, and there are ways you can, we've got a whole series of exercises on what you do to strengthen the shin muscles, like raising your toes as high as you can and walking around on your heels. Makes you look stupid outside, but what do you care what you look like? And you can feel your shin muscles getting better, going upstairs 2 at a time, holding close to the railing to make sure you don't slip, but not touching it because balance is important. So there are all kinds of exercises people have never done. They may be runners, they may be think that they're thin and that's good, but they don't have the strength they need. They need to get assessed, find out where they're weak, and then get strong.
Correct. And I like how you've said that, you know, even there are areas that you found that you weren't doing as well, and it was humbling. I think that's correct for every single person. You're not going to be above average or in the top tier for every single category or measure of strength or mobility.
Absolutely right.
So I appreciate how you've spoken to, here's some ways that somebody that's sedentary and they don't have a routine can get started, as well as here's somebody who's already working out, have a routine in place. Here's how you can get even better. We might also have some viewers that are tuning into this saying, Fred, you're 87 years old. Look at you, look at the things that you're saying. You're one of those super seniors. You're one of those quote unquote freaks of nature. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I was a kid. I went to school on the south side of Chicago. I went out for every team and I never made a single team. I was not a good athlete. I was so skinny and little that to get admitted to West Point, which is how I got out of the south side of Chicago, I had to actually gain weight. I was too skinny and my chest was too small. So, and at West Point, of course, every single day you have to engage in a sport. So I got better at things, but I was never an accomplished athlete. At 87, in golf and skiing, I'm an accomplished athlete. And it's because I changed, not because sports got easier. And you can change, folks. I mean, I can look you dead bang in the eye and say, life is the most precious thing in the world. You only get one go-round. You don't get another. And giving yourself from 60 to 90 is half your adult life, and making those years as good as all the rest of your life, there's nothing to me more important than that. I say this over and over and over. And sadly, it's not about cardio, although HIIT, intense cardio training, is part of it. It's not about being skinny. It's not about long, slow walks. It's about intense physical exercise with the heaviest weights you can handle. We have two kinds of muscles, fast twitch and slow twitch. Slow twitch is slow running, walking 10 minutes after dinner. That's 40% of your muscles. But 60% of your muscles are fast twitch. Skiing, golf, tennis, sprinting, not falling down.
Right.
Living the life you always leaded without having to worry about where you're going to step.
Yeah, that's very powerful, and also very reassuring, Fred, that you're not one of those outliers, that this is achievable for everyone.
Yes.
And so at least for me, that's very reassuring to know.
Following the StrongPath teaches all that, and it will give you that, I promise you. It's hard work, but everything in life that's worth having is worth doing hard work for. Absolutely.
Couldn't agree more with that, Fred. I think this is a really good place to end our conversation and discussion. Fred, it's been an absolute pleasure being able to hear what you have to say on this really important topic. I want to say thank you so much for sharing with me and our entire network of partners your knowledge on combating sarcopenia and how every individual can remain strong, vibrant, and independent throughout the entire lifespan, regardless of what age they are. And I'd encourage every single person that's participating today to check out strongpath.com, load it up with all of that up-to-date research that Fred just mentioned, as well as that's a place where you could pick up a copy of Fred's book, Choosing the Strong Path, Reversing the Downward Spiral of Aging, as a resource to further make this a reality. For the viewers out there, thank you for watching this session. Do be sure to check out the other featured speakers as part of our Lyceum, currently available for viewing right now. And as we sign off, I'd like to thank Fred. Thank you again for being with us. I really appreciate you being a part of our conference round on Where You Live Matters.